continue the dialogue on this, I'll say a few things in response to Brett. I think all of us have really tried to, over the past period, since the motion, we've tried to educate ourselves, both in terms of, a little bit more on what this vehicle is, what this program is. I had done some I continued my education, but in addition to that, what our police are up against, and what our city's up against. Reference was made to the heroin presentation that was done at the high school last week, and it was one of the most sobering things I've been to. And we've lost 6 kids. The reality of the entire drug trade is not something that exists in Woodland or West Sacramento. It exists here. I know that. We see that now. We see that at multiple levels. We see it at what the police are facing. We also see it at what our kids are facing. So I've appreciated the patience with which Darren and Landy have worked with me, and I think worked with all of us to understand more what is going on. And that's exactly why, I had proposed that we engage the citizens more. And in fact, I hope that, one of the outcomes of tonight is that my colleagues will affirm that they would designate me to continue to work with Darren on the forums, which I've started to talk to him about and met with the consultant about. To come to Brett's question, I think the answer for me is yes, I'd be very willing to consider putting resources into a vehicle that provided protection. I want to go through the entire process. It's not just that symbols matter, which they do, and I tried to speak to that. Some people agreed with that perspective, some people didn't. But fundamentally, I don't feel that the vehicle, the MRAP, is adapted to our situation. It does one thing well, protects people inside. You talk to the military about that, read military literature. There's a lot of disagreement about the value of this vehicle. There's a lot, even up till today. One of the reasons we're seeing them show up in our communities is because they haven't worked very well, except for one thing. As you're going down a road, pretty much a straight road, a flat road, and a bomb goes off, it will protect everybody inside. That we know. Everybody agrees with that. Where the disagreement comes in is what happens when you need to wheel that into a tight spot. What happens when you need to wheel it up a driveway? What happens when you need to put it between buildings? What happens if you need to go over uneven terrain? What happens in an urban environment? And I think the consensus there is that it's not very well adapted. It's the product, and I know Landy will disagree with me on this, but it's the product of really a broken military system. There were 5 companies that made these, 10 variants. When they got into theater, they couldn't even find the parts to repair them because they're specialized parts. Now, I know we've been told that and I'm not doubting it, you guys, but I know we've been told it'd be relatively low cost, it's just a truck. But the reality is the experience in military situations around the world has been a complete headache. It's not served well. Separate supply and logistic lines had to be created just to service this vehicle in Iraq and Afghanistan. If I were to make a prediction today, and I'm being recorded, so I guess this makes a prediction, I would say in about 5 years there's going to be a lot of jurisdictions that are going to be looking to get rid of these things because they just aren't adapted to the situation. I stick with what I said about symbol. It does matter. I believe it does matter. I believe it matters a lot. I also believe personally that we need to create a very clear wall of separation between military and police. And it's funny, it's not because of my lack of trust in our police force here, obviously, and if I need to repeat it, I will. You guys have done a hell of a job building the trust in this community. No one can say you haven't. I said it will hurt it, it will. if we bring military equipment in. And I'm not worried about you. I'm worried about people sitting on this side. I am. I don't know the situation in Ferguson. I don't know the situation elsewhere, but I do know that there are times when people on this side, and happened not too far from here, people sitting on this side made decisions about how to respond that were inappropriate. And we don't know what we're talking about. So, given all of that, I have moved in the past 6 weeks. I've moved to an understanding that the situation in our city has changed over the past 10 years that I've lived here. That it is more dangerous, that there are more weapons, that there are more people with mental health problems with those weapons, that there are more people dealing in illicit drugs that have those weapons. That's real, I get it. I think parenthetically, one of the things that I have to say should, I think, disturb all of us is that you've acknowledged to me that one of the groups that you're concerned about are people who are tactically trained, who know how to use high-powered weapons, and the tactics to counter your tactics, and have PTSD. Who are those people? The former military. And I don't know about anybody else, but I'm a little bit offended that the U.S. military would send us a $600,000 piece of equipment, or up to $1 million, but not give us the wherewithal to treat in our own communities the root cause of the violence. I find that to be something that we should all look within our hearts and ask, is this the direction our country wants to go? Now you say, Rob, that's beyond our situation. I know that. But every once in a while I think it's okay for one community to raise their hand and say, this is insanity. This doesn't work. Change doesn't happen in Washington, D.C. Change happens because we decide we want to be different. So in answer to your question, Brett, yes. If we need to find the resources to protect our police, then we should do it, and it should be based on an ask. It should be based on a clear ask. It should be based on a clear needs assessment. It should be based on community engagement, understanding what the challenges are, understanding what you're up against. And when that time comes, I hope that we can do it in the following way, that we can go across the street to the university, that we can go to some of the other cities and jurisdictions in the area and say, how do we share something like this? Because if you talk to Matt Carmichael at the university, he stands in fear of an Isla Vista. He stands in fear of that. I think we should be talking to the chancellor about, will they put resources in if we'll put resources in. So I'm not going to change my perspective on giving this back. I am going to say that I am willing to work with you guys, and I am willing personally to try to find resources, and I will, if we need to, help you privately raise money if we can't seem to find it in our budget. I will. But I just don't think that this thing is appropriate for what we have going in this city.